Welcome back, everyone. We're so glad that you could join us tonight on Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. We've been on this journey together, and we're so glad that you are journeying with us. Tonight, we have Aaron Owen with us, who is going to talk about his Unchained and the effects of addiction on a marriage. We're so glad that Aaron is with us. But first, before we get to the interview, we want to ask, as we have been every night, everyone to register by texting the word Unchained to the number you see right there on your screen. And when you register, you'll have a prompt there that you can fill out some stuff. But just as we've said, we will not give out your information or sell it to a third party or anything. It will be only for the use of us texting you to remind you of the meeting and the topic for that night. Also, when you register, you will also be entered into the drawing to receive our speaker, Richie Halverson's book, The Darkness Will Not Overcome. And we're giving away that book every single night. You don't have to do this more than once. If you've already registered, if you've already texted the word Unchained, you're good to go. Also, let us know where you're watching this from, and if you're watching it with a small group as well. So that way, we love knowing where everyone is watching this series from. Also, share the content. I'm sure that every one of us knows someone who is addicted, or we know someone who has an addiction problem, who is chained, who needs to be unchained, who needs to find hope, who needs to be healed. So share the content, like the content, whether you're watching on YouTube or watching on Facebook. Tonight we're going to have Richie's presentation, but first we're going to have our interview here with Aaron Owen. So Aaron, we're so glad that you could be here with us tonight. So Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your upbringing and childhood and your story.
Well, so most of you may know that you know that I grew up in West Virginia, way up in the northern part of West Virginia, about 4 miles from Ohio and 2 miles from Pennsylvania, in a town called Wheeling, and it's not far from Pittsburgh and not far from Columbus. Attended a church there, went to private church school my entire grade school life, and then went on to academy in Mount Vernon, Ohio, and then went from there to Ohio State University, to college for a few years. And about that time, we decided that North Carolina was a place I should move to. My parents and my uncle came down to actually build this church here. My uncle was, at the time, my cousin was the pastor at this church, and my uncle came down to be the general contractor. My father came down to help him. They liked it down here, and they said, come on down. So I left Columbus, Ohio, and moved to Raleigh, North Carolina.
Now, what year was that you came here?
That was 1986.
Oh, to help build this church here.
Finish it up. They were just finishing up the church when I moved here.
Okay.
Built a bunch of the walls in the basement. My dad and my uncle were both masonry contractors, laid brick, block, stone. I grew up doing that and moved down here and decided that was something I could do down here.
Oh, okay.
So, and then, fast forward a little bit, I got decided to start. My dad and I started a company ourselves together, and about that same time, I got married. About a year later, we had our son, and about 6 months after that, my wife at the time started using drugs. She was a nurse. She first got caught at the hospital for diversion of narcotics, and and they did this nice little program, kind of undercover, so you could go and get treatment to help, keep everything. Seems like it's a big thing with addiction, is keeping it hush hush.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of undercover, so she went through treatment, and of course there's couples treatment part of that, and it was a, it was a 3-month program that you had to go, 3 nights a week.
So she went and you went with her.
I did.
Okay.
She had to go other times also, but there were parts of that. And our son then, Parker's his name, was about 7 months old. And then that progressed. Went through treatment, thought things kind of, were going to get better. And they probably were for about 3 or 4 months. And she started using again, and went back through treatment through, Wake County has a wonderful treatment facility for people that want to try to get help. They do a wonderful couples counseling program. And all of this time, I'm not knowing what's going on, really, because of my background. I guess I was kind of naive, or I don't know. I didn't grow up around people that drank or did drugs or anything like that. I grew up church and private school, and it's just kind of a odd.
So this kind of life, we'll say lifestyle was pretty much all brand new to you. It's like you've never dealt with anything like this before, right?
No, never. I mean,
you heard of it, but never dealt with it.
Exactly. Yeah. It was through treatment. You go in this couple. We did all of these programs. Seemed like for married couple, they do a good job of trying to include the spouse with, because there's no trust. There's lying. There's stealing. There's, and I don't want to get into bad stories that happen, but I mean, the teller at the bank calls you and tells you your bank account's gone, and all your savings are gone, or you get credit card bills, and you just get overwhelmed, and you don't know what's happening. Mm-hmm. And that went, it just continued. It would go into treatment, spend 3 or 4 months in treatment, and then come out and be 3 or 4 months clean, and then it start all over again. Of course, you pull away from your church family, you pull away from your family. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is not something you're proud of that's going on in your life.
Right.
Feeling very alone, very not knowing who to talk to, not knowing that somebody else has gone through this or going through this is the hardest part, I think.
So while you were going through this, you kind of felt all alone, pretty much.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was, of course, I have a son that trying to raise through this, and now he's 4 years old, mm-hmm. going older, and just going through this cycle every year. It would be like a spring thing and a fall thing, and it was almost got to a point where you could almost do it by the calendar. You could know April, October.
Right. So whenever those times would come, you were like, okay, I'm ready. Let's see what happens now.
Yeah, or you just, it's just like, you keep hoping and you keep praying. You try, and they try to teach you in couples counsel that, it's not your fault and you can't control it and you can't cure it and all this stuff, which is helpful. It's helpful, but it's not, I guess. She finally went to a treatment place over towards the mountains somewhere, and I went to a Nar-Anon, Al-Anon meeting all by myself. Finally, it wasn't something that was part of a couple's treatment and stuff, and I really realized that other people went through this too, and you could do it, and you could make it, and it was such a relief to know that I wasn't the only person this was happening to.
Right.
Um,
Right.
then by that time, our son is 5 years old, and had to make a decision. She wasn't doing any better, and it wasn't healthy for him, wasn't healthy for me, and unfortunately, our marriage didn't make it through it.
Right.
She continued even after, I mean, of course, I had to stay in contact because of our son with supervised visitation and they just custody stuff and just a lot of junk
Right.
that went along with that, and you know, and to as a Christian or as a person that you believe that marriage is supposed to be forever, and you try to do everything that you can to make it work, and it's it was a sad time, but a relief that I didn't have to do that anymore.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true because it not only does it have an effect on you as the spouse, but it does have an effect upon the children as well. And you know, you don't want to bring, even at 2, 3, 5 years old, they're affected by what's going on. They know, and they know more and understand more than a lot of parents give them credit for.
Absolutely. My son, he had to not. I mean, he went through his first 5 years of his life without, his was in halfway houses and treatment facilities, and she wasn't there. And even when she was there, she wasn't there.
Hmm.
And it was just a a a time that just is a challenge to know that you're not alone. And I can say, I had a base of Christ in my life, but it didn't. I was so ashamed of what was going on in my life that it wasn't shared with my church family. It wasn't shared with anybody. I mean, it was something that you kept hidden, and you didn't want people to know that, your wife was a drug addict.
Right.
And I, I, it developed into a thing, and and it got to where, after we divorced, and she's still involved with trying to get, she wanted visitation and stuff with him, but not knowing whether she's clean or not using or all that. So it was supervised visitation. It was going through to a point where, when he was 13, 14 years old, he just didn't want to see her anymore, because she would say she's coming to see him play hockey, or she's coming to pick him up for dinner, and she just wouldn't show up.
Mm.
And and he just didn't understand what, why she would tell him she was coming, and she wouldn't do it. It made my existence. I worked very hard trying to not ever even tell him, as far as the Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. I mean, everything I told him was factual, because he had such a disconnect of what to believe, and and it just changed how you interact with that, I think. And then, like I say, when he was 13, 14 years old, he decided he didn't want to see her anymore, didn't want to be around her. And that was, that was hard for him too. I mean, in that, and unfortunately, she continued to battle her addiction until her life ended, 3 years ago. And it's just a sad ending to, a troubled existence.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's one thing that you said in there that I want to ask is, you said that you found relief after, I think it was after you had divorced or separated, you found relief. So was there, after your divorce and after your separation and stuff like that, was there anything that you did for yourself to come and find help with the effects that had?
Yeah, then I started going. I went to a number of Al-Anon, Ar-Anon meetings, and just found out I wasn't alone. Finding out that other people have gone through this and lived through it and worked through it was very helpful.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, that's why I'm doing this, is because I want people to know that you don't have, you're not alone. Even your church family, there are so many people that deal with addiction issues that you don't need to be ashamed if you're married and or a family member, or it's not your fault. You didn't cause it. You can't cure it. You can't control it, and you just need people to be around to love you.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, to remind people who are watching that if they're going through the same thing that you went through, they're not by themselves. There's people out there who are going through the same things, and just to be around those people who went through them so they can get the help and that they need, and and the friendship and the family or whatever you want to call it, to help them make it through, that they're not at fault. And so I'm glad you said that, Aaron, and I'm glad you came and told your story, and thank you so much for coming and being here. Is there any last thing you want to say at all?
I just want people to know that if you're dealing with this, you can get through it. Ask for help. Go find somebody to talk to. Reach out and just know that you're not alone, and other people have gotten through this, and you can make it.
Right. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And right now, what we will do is we will get into our speaker, Richie Halverson's presentation, our 7th breakthrough. And then right after his presentation, we'll come back and we will have our drawing for our book. So right now, here's Richie Halverson with the 8th presentation, our 7th breakthrough.
Welcome to Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. If we want to experience freedom, we've got to break through the chains holding us back. We break through denial with honesty. We break through insanity with hope and open-mindedness. We've got to break through the paralyzation with faith and action. Break through fear with courage. Break through our ego and pride with humility and learning. We've got to break through the shame and guilt with forgiveness. Today, we're going to break through weakness with persistence and practice. In recovery, people often say, don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle. And when we're recovering, it's about progress, not perfection. Matthew 7:24-27 says, everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the wind blew and beat against the house, and it fell, and great was the fall. If we want to build a new, unchained life, we have to start putting things into practice. Progress, not perfection. James 1:22 says, when you only listen and you do nothing, you're only fooling yourself. Matthew 7:24, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice. Living an unchained life takes practice. The reason many of us don't see the changes in our life, the changes in our marriage, the changes in our family that we would like to see is we're not putting things that we learn into practice. Rene Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. But it takes more than just thinking. It takes doing. We can know something mentally, and that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to live that out in our life in reality. We do not become what we repeatedly hear. We become what we repeatedly do. Recovery works when we work it. 1 Corinthians 9:24-27, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Run like you want to recover. We've got to run like we want our marriage to improve. We've got to run like we actually want to be unchained. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and I make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Paul is saying we've got to practice what we preach. An unchanged life does not happen by accident. An athlete doesn't become an all-star by sitting in a classroom. No, by putting it into practice. It takes hard work. The word athlete, you know what it means? It means to struggle. It's a struggle to live a new life. It's a struggle to break old habits. It's a struggle to do what you should do when it's not what you want to do. It's a struggle to forgive people sometimes. But every time we put these breakthroughs into practice instead of old behaviors, we grow stronger, happier, healthier, and more free. But it's going to take practice. It's progress, not perfection. Think of how much time you have put into practicing your addiction. Think of how much time we've put into practicing our habit, or maybe our hang-up or our heartache. Think of the amount of time that we have put into living our old life. I mean, some of us have practiced our whole life being negative. That's not going to change overnight. Some of us have practiced our whole life getting angry at the drop of a hat. That's not going to change overnight. You can't give up after the first time you mess up. You've got to keep getting up. Persistence, perseverance, practice. You know, practice requires patience. My sponsor used to always say, be careful what you pray for. Whenever I pray for patience, God sends a traffic jam. You know, we've got to learn to practice these principles in all our affairs. If we don't use them, we lose them. Practice takes patience. We didn't become addicted overnight. We didn't become angry overnight. We didn't become controlling overnight. Recovery is not a one-time event. Living an unchained life isn't a one-time thing. It's a daily recommitment. Every day we decide to live a life happy, joyous, and free. In 1 Timothy 4:7-8 in the Message, it says, exercise daily in God. No spiritual flabbiness, please. Workouts in the gymnasium are useful, but a disciplined life in God is far more, making you fit both today and forever. And this is the thing, if you're going to start practicing, you've got to start practicing before the crisis comes. If you wait until you need something before putting into practice, you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to be in trouble. If you wait until the storm comes before building a good foundation, it'll never be able to stand. Why does it seem we always have to wait until our life falls apart before we're willing to do something about it? I always had to do things the hard way. But before I treasured the things that really mattered, I had to lose everything else. Why do we always have to wait until our life is falling apart before we're willing to do what we should have been doing all along? This character, Jonah in the Bible, has to get swallowed by a whale before he's willing to start listening. Samson, He waits until he's bald and blind. Peter waits until he's denied and deserted. And that's why we've got to start practicing right now. We can't wait until we need it before we start practicing it. We got to practice it now. Don't wait until you have a heart attack before you start doing something about the way you're living. Don't wait until you're researching divorce attorneys before you start researching marriage counselors. Don't wait until you get the diagnosis with lung cancer before you say, you know what, I need to start trying to quit smoking. Start practicing right now. Man, of all the things God unchained me from, smoking was one of the hardest. I mean, every addiction is hard. Every bad behavior is hard. Every habit is hard. But man, smoking was one of the hardest because you see, I had put a lot of practice into smoking. When I got up in the morning, it was the first thing that I did. Before I went to bed, it was the last thing that I did. I smoked after every meal. I mean, it integrates and infiltrates our lives. I practiced smoking a lot. Well, I'm going to have to put some practice into quitting smoking a lot as well. It's simple, but it's not always easy. We've got to put things into practice before the crisis comes. In Matthew 7:25, it said it rained hard, the floods came and the winds blew and hit that house, but it did not fall because it was built. Notice it's past tense. The wise man built his house before the storm came. You got to build a foundation of an unchained life before the problems come, before the crisis and the storm comes, because it's coming. It's easy to not use dope when life is going good. It's easy to be nice when you like someone. It's easy to be faithful in a relationship when you're getting along. If you wait until the storm comes before you start working and practicing, it's going to be too late. Begin building an unchained life right now. These principles have to go from our heads to our heart. We've got to go to the core of the problem. A good life requires a good foundation. We have to dig down deep. Any good structure has a good foundation where they dug down deep. The part of the house that matters most is the part you can't see. The surface is never as important as the foundation, which is interesting to me because it seems like the surface is the only thing we really care about. You know, we tend to focus on the surface, but God, He focuses on what's below. In Matthew 23:25, it says, "You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they're full of greed and self-indulgence." You see, God always goes below. 1 Samuel 16:7, "For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Now, I'm not saying the surface isn't significant. I'm just saying it doesn't matter as much as we make it. It's much better to have a good foundation. What matters most in any structure, including life, is what's below the surface. What's going on where people can't see. You know, what's going on in your foundation? Luke 6:46-48, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and does them, I'll show you what he's like. He's like a man building a house who dug deep." The wise builder didn't stop digging until he hit something strong enough to build his life on. There's only one person strong enough to sustain you. There's only one person stable enough to sustain your marriage. There's only one person righteous enough. Don't stop digging until you hit the bottom. Dig past the dysfunction. Dig past the depression. Dig past the present dilemma. Don't let these things hold you back. Keep digging past the problems, past the pain, all the way until you hit something hard that can hold you up. Man, in early recovery, I had messed up so many times. I had relapsed so many times, been to treatment in and out of jails, that when I was finally made it to recovery, I was afraid that I was going to relapse again. And you always hear that famous, we've talked about it in this series, hitting bottom. And I had heard that so many times growing up, and so I went up to my sponsor and I asked him, because I was afraid I was going to relapse and go back out there. And I said, "How do I know when I hit my bottom? And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, Richie, your bottom happens when you put down the shovel. When I finally hit something solid enough to build my life on, I stopped digging. God was the rock at the bottom of my barrel. What are you building your life on? If it's a career, you can lose it. If it's a relationship, you can lose it. If it's your money, you can lose it. If it's your youth, I hate to break it to you, you're going to lose it. We've got to build our lives on something we can't lose. To live an unchained life, we've got to build our life on something bigger and stronger and firmer. Which is why I've discovered that sometimes God allows the crisis to come. Sometimes God's got to allow the storm to come in order to show you what you've built your life on. In Hebrews 12:27, it says, all of creation will be shaken and removed so that only unshakable things will remain. God loves you too much not to shake you. He's got to shake all the fake friends out of your life. He's got to shake all the dysfunctional thinking out of your life. He's got to keep on shaking so that when all is said and done, the only thing we depend on is something that we can never lose. Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, for everything there is a season, a time to break down and a time to build up. There are some things in your life, there are some people in your life, there are some ways of doing things, some stinking thinking that you need to let God dig out from the root. Let Jesus dig down to the root and dig it out. You see, before there can be transformation, there must first be excavation. God always breaks us down before He builds. He loves us too much to let us build our life on something that cannot sustain our life. And this goes for everybody. All of us try to build our lives on something other than God, and it will always fall short. But if you build your life on God, you can have the confidence that He can hold you up. You can have the confidence that if God's breaking it up, it's only so He can give you something better. And so here in this parable that Jesus tells, we've got two builders. They go through the same storm and they're working on the same project and both have access to the same tools. From the outside, they look exactly the same, but one is a fool and one is wise. The way they respond to the storm is totally different. The fool falls apart, but the wise builder stands firm. Because the wise man built his life upon the rock. A rock is something solid. A rock doesn't change. It's concrete. It's in stone. Everything else changes. But God, the solid rock, doesn't change. In Matthew 16:18, it says, upon this rock I will build my church, and the powers of hell can't even conquer it. When the wise man saw the storm coming, he doesn't panic. What does he do? He praises God in the storm. Let me tell you, if God is your foundation, you'll be able to praise God in the storm too. Your life won't fall apart the second something goes wrong. Yeah, the enemy, your addiction, may try to knock your house down. But if you built your house on God, He will not prevail. Matthew 16:18, the gates of hell shall not prevail against your house. You see, Jesus dug His way down from heaven, all the way to Calvary. And He went all the way to the root of our problem, which is our brokenness. It's that hunger inside of us that keeps looking for satisfaction and love in all the wrong places. He went all the way to the root of our problem in order to give you something that you can build your life on today, right now. It's all about progress, not perfection. Jesus is the only perfect person who's ever lived. Trust in Him. You don't have to do everything perfectly because He did everything perfectly. Trust in Him. Build your life on Him and start living an unchained life today.
Wow, what a powerful message. Thank you, Richie Halverson, for that wonderful message, our seventh breakthrough that we all need to hear to live an unchained life, to have hope and healing. If you were blessed by Pastor Richie's message, write in the comments below, thank you, Pastor Richie, I was blessed. We want to give a big thank you to Aaron Owen, who told his story tonight about the effects of addiction on a marriage and on a child. If you were blessed by Aaron's testimony tonight, right? Thank you, Aaron. I was blessed by your testimony tonight. Friends, it's now time of the evening where we are going to give away our speaker, Pastor Richie Halverson's book, The Darkness Will Not Overcome. And our winner tonight is Jim Gherkin. Jim Gherkin. So, everyone in the comments below, write, congratulations, Jim. Jim, we will get your information and get this book to you. Remember to register so you can be in the drawing for the book, and also you can get some text from us to remind you about the meeting happening every night between Friday and Saturday night, and the topic of those 2 nights. We're so glad that you have been here on this journey of being unchained and finding hope and healing from addiction. And we'll see you right here tomorrow night at 7:30. We will have another interview. And tomorrow night is Jeannie Owen. And we're looking forward to that interview as well. And so have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow night, 7:30, Unchained, Hope and Healing from Addiction. Have a great night.